So there's quite a few hormones that play a role in our body composition management, right? So when we're thinking about body fat mass and muscle mass. And I thought today I'd talk about 3 specifically that we can focus on and try to improve in our body to actually improve our body composition. In other words, increase muscle mass and decrease fat mass. So the very first one I want to talk about, and it's one that we've really already spoken about quite a bit in previous videos, but it is super important to reiterate its importance and how we can actually, make sure that we are managing it optimally in the body, and that is, you probably guessed it, insulin. Okay, so the first one is insulin. Insulin is a very important hormone in the body. It is excreted by the pancreas, and it is responsible for actually making sure that the glucose moves from the blood into the cells. So think of insulin as a key that unlocks your muscle, your brain, and your liver cells, so that the glucose can move from the bloodstream into those cells to actually be used as energy. That is actually what it's intended to be used for. But now, unfortunately, if we have insulin resistance, which is in quite a lot of cases, we see that the blood sugar levels actually spike. This is because the insulin or the cells become resistant to the insulin, meaning that that key doesn't unlock the cells as effectively as it should, which leads to more glucose staying in the bloodstream, not entering the cells, leading to an increase in blood sugar levels. This leads to a response for the body to actually try and get rid of the sugar in another way, and that is by storing it as fat, usually around your waist, but also in the organs, and we call that visceral fat. And you've probably seen that on your in-body report if you are struggling with increased visceral fat. So that is the role of insulin. We need insulin to be functioning optimally, because unfortunately, if insulin resistance is present and we're not doing anything effectively to really make sure that we are trying to resensitize the cells for that insulin, it actually might progress on over to type 2 diabetes, which we want to avoid at all costs, of course. Now, the things that actually influence insulin quite a lot is carbohydrates. Yes, carbohydrates unfortunately do have a bad reputation for being things that actually have a massive impact on insulin, and that is because the two work hand in hand. Now, it's not necessary to restrict carbohydrates completely or avoid them completely, because carbohydrates still are important. They give us fuel, fiber, and a lot of nutrients we still need, and of course they are convenient and tasty foods to add to our diet. So the important thing is just to make sure that we are having the right amount and the better types of carbohydrates where we can. So I have a few examples here for us today to see portion sizes, because this is usually where the problem comes in, where people, you're not really too sure of what the portion size should be, and I definitely urge you to look at your eating plan for that. But it's often that we consume carbohydrates, unfortunately, because they are for most people, the nicer part of the meal. Okay, so first of all, I have a wrap example here. This is quite a tiny wrap if you think about it. If you fold it like this, this is typically what a portion size for a carbohydrate would be. It's quite a small wrap. So that's firstly an example. This is rice. So this is quite a big portion of rice, and that's not really difficult to actually consume this amount of rice, I would say, or even this amount of pasta. But this is actually 3 portions of carbohydrates if we had to put it into exchanges, as we call them as dietitians. So typically this would rather be a portion of rice compared to this. So it's quite a lot less than what we typically would have. Then of course we get carbohydrate portions like blueberries and citrus fruits and things that are lower in carbohydrates, so we can actually have more of it. So those are things we have to look out for. We're trying to aim for low GI carbohydrates, and we're trying to keep 2 smaller portions as far as possible. So that is for insulin resistance. Another thing that also plays a role in insulin resistance is, of course, saturated fat. Saturated fat does sometimes lead to more insulin resistance. So think of your animal fats like butter, your fat from meat, the skin of the chicken, coconut oil, and so forth. So it's not that we should be avoiding that completely unless you are vegetarian or vegan, but it's just to be conscious of the amount that we take in. And we'd rather want to swap out our saturated fats for unsaturated fats, like your plant-based fats, like for example your nuts and seeds, olive oil, avocado, and so forth. So the second hormone is testosterone. So testosterone is actually the most abundant hormone in both females and males. So it's not just the male hormone. females also do require testosterone. Testosterone is really important for building muscle and maintaining muscle, and unfortunately, when we reach our 30s and onwards, it actually decreases every year. So we really need to be conscious of making sure that we are supporting the body to produce as much testosterone as possible. So things that actually decrease the testosterone additionally to aging is a high estrogen level. So estrogen often also is increased when there's too much fat in the body. So it's a vicious cycle. The more fat we have in the body, the more estrogen we have, the less testosterone we have, the less testosterone we have, the more body fat we have, and the cycle just carries on. And that is why it is so very important to make sure that we are managing our body composition, and as soon as we start to see the scale climb in terms of body fat mass, that we nip it in the bud as soon as possible. Now, when it comes to foods that actually affect testosterone, there's quite a lot of controversy around what we can do to increase testosterone levels and so forth. But typically, we'd want to stick to a whole foods diet, as they call it. Typically, something that's lower in refined and processed foods. We want to go for the lower GI carbohydrates instead of like the refined, whiter types of carbs that are going to spike the blood sugar levels. And then exercise has also been shown to increase testosterone levels. So it's actually just, again, having that balance and making sure that we are exercising, keeping active, and then also having that healthy, balanced diet that's full of variety. So the last hormone is growth hormone. So growth hormone is actually something that's not spoken about a lot. It is, however, in the heavy bodybuilding field and so forth being spoken about, but in just general populations we don't really talk about it, and it's actually quite important to talk about growth hormone. So growth hormone, unfortunately, just like testosterone, decreases as we hit our 30s, and that is also why we see a steady decrease in body muscle mass as we age, unfortunately. So that is why we need to consciously be focusing on building muscle and maintaining muscle as fast as possible. Growth hormone is therefore responsible for building muscle, maintaining muscle, and then unfortunately, as it decreases, this also tends to decrease, and fat mass increases to take the place of that muscle. Now, growth hormone, we can actually, again, just like testosterone, manage by managing our body fat mass, which is something we do with exercise regularly. Again, building muscle or strength training and resistance training can actually lead to an increase in growth hormone and testosterone. And then, of course, having a balanced variety type of diet that's not heavily refined and heavily dependent on carbohydrates, but really focusing on getting healthy, lean proteins, like, for example, your chicken, your fish, or your plant-based proteins like your chickpeas, lentils, nuts and seeds, and those types of things in the diet as well. So those are the three hormones: insulin, growth hormone, and testosterone. That's really important. So if you are suspecting that your testosterone levels might be low, it is something we can actually test, or doctors can test. So that's something you can maybe have a look at, and they can recommend a medication or supplement for that if necessary. But there's still other hormones that really also still play a role in managing our body fat composition or muscle mass in our body, like, for example, our thyroid, like I've mentioned before, estrogen, leptin, ghrelin, which is responsible for appetite and feeling full and so forth. So it's a holistic approach that we need to follow. But the basic things you can take away from this video is that we need to be following a variety in our diet. Try to stick to less refined, minimally processed foods like brown rice instead of white rice, for example. Going for your citrus fruits or your berries that's a bit lower in carbohydrates compared to your other fruits like tropical fruits or bananas. If you have those, just keep your portions regulated when it comes to that. And then making sure you are including lean protein into your diet to make sure that you are getting the benefits from that when it comes to building muscle. And then, of course, making sure you are maintaining and building some muscle through exercise, whether it be through your Body 20 sessions or then doing some resistance or strength training additionally to that. Let us know if you have any questions, and then I'll see you in the next one.